Hello, everyone. My name is Moira Rutherlingham. I'm here with Allison Nichols. We are accessibility advisors at OCADU's Student Accessibility Services Center, which is within the Student Wellness Center group. So we go by SAS. I'll start referring to Student Accessibility Services as SAS for our little portion of today's webinar. And like Shelley said, today we'll be going over what it is that we do at SAS, who we support, a little bit about the accommodations process, and Allison will go into more detail about self-advocacy and self-awareness and how that might be helpful to learn while you're in school and also translate to the workforce as well. So here on this slide, you'll read that we go over who Student Accessibility Services supports. So we support all undergraduate, graduate, and continuing studies students who have either a temporary or permanent disability. And this can span mental health disabilities, physical health disabilities, and we also support students who might not have a diagnosis or health condition that they're currently assessed for or have a doctor's support for, but we can always speak with you about how this is affecting school and talk about different referrals and next steps that might make sense to make school a bit more smooth. So here we also note that you can register at any point in your academic studies, and that's for first point of contact. Anytime in the year we do new registration appointments all year round, and that can support if something new comes up or a new course that you weren't expecting to affect you a certain way. That might always happen throughout your career at OCAD. So please just reach out to us, and there's the email address on the next slide that I'll speak about as well. So with accessibility advising, we work on accommodations. So the accommodations process, it's a collaborative effort between yourselves, your accessibility advisor, as well as your instructors. And we go through an accommodation plan with you the first time we meet. So here, yes, the second slide, perfect. The first step would be to email us at sas@ocadu.ca. And you can email this main inbox with just general questions you might have, but also to make that point of contact to have that registration appointment. So what is a registration appointment? Once you email SAS and an appointment is made, you will be connected with one of the advisors. So myself or Allison or one of our other advisors will give you a call and start to speak with you about how you're being affected in school, what your experience has been, the impact of your disability, the expectations of your program. It's a back and forth conversation, and we work with you to make sure that the accommodation plan makes sense and that we're clear on next steps that make sense to have these accommodations communicated to your instructors as well. So we can, in this meeting, we can provide many prompt questions, and all questions are voluntary to answer. And we really just work with you to find a plan that will work for the rest of your time at OCAD. And also we can modify this plan at any time throughout the year. So we might land at the end of this conversation, we might land on one or more accommodations that make sense for your unique disability experience. And I just wanted to go over one example of what an accommodation might look like and how many different reasons there might be for us to put an accommodation in place. So you may have heard of extensions as an accommodation. And for one student, this might be put in place due to difficulty focusing. And for another student, it could be related to reading difficulties, maybe muscle weakness, needing that extra time to take breaks that they need, might be related to their medication schedule, and the list goes on. So that I just wanted to bring that up because it is that conversation that we have with you is important for us to determine how you're being affected uniquely. And the reason I bring up the whole registration appointment for this webinar is because this type of registration appointment might be something that you come across or experience in your employment as well. When you're speaking with HR, you might recall speaking with your advisor here at OCAD, and that practice of thinking about how your disability is affecting your ability to do certain tasks and thinking about how you can adapt the task to still demonstrate your knowledge and still participate in a fair and empowering way. So it's good practice to think about your strengths and know how to communicate what your needs might be and build that plan collaboratively with somebody. So Allison will go into more detail about what that is and what self-advocacy, how self-advocacy can be really important.
Great, thanks, Moira. Sorry, I just had to unmute myself. So as Moira shared, I'm Allison Nichols. I'm a Senior Accessibility Advisor at Student Accessibility Services. So I guess just kind of building off, a bit of, as Moira shared, some of the skills and strategies that you may develop while you are student accessing academic accommodations can carry over once you leave school and are seeking employment. I'm wondering, maybe Shelley, if you could just shift to the next slide around building self-awareness. Yes, thank you. So developing self-awareness and self-advocacy skills can help with the transition from school to employment, especially for people who may require or are considering employment accommodations. Building self-awareness is a good first step to help know ourselves better so we can be able to share our needs with others. So if you think about yourself in the middle, reflecting on some of these areas might help you understand yourself and your needs better. So thinking in terms of functional impact, considering the ways in which your disability impacts you. So for some people, it can kind of be helpful to break that down more into categories. So thinking of like the cognitive impact, on focus, concentration, maybe the ability to plan and organize. Maybe a person experiences physical impact of their disability. So on their fine motor skills, their stamina, energy levels. Maybe they experience more social emotional impact in terms of, communication, working with others. Other areas could be on, your sleep, hearing, vision. So these are all, important things to consider in terms of your unique experience with your disability. Other areas to think about, are your strengths. So, what are you good at? What are you, confident in? What are potential challenges that you may face? And these could be specifically related to the impact of your disability. So thinking, for example, someone who maybe due to their disability has difficulties with focus and concentration. So it could be helpful to reflect, what are some potential challenges that might come up in an employment position. So maybe, working in loud or busy environments, could be difficult. So again, having that awareness, can be helpful when we are identifying needs. And also thinking too, like what strategies and tools help you to manage better. Does being organized help? Having a plan, scheduling, setting reminders for yourself? Does writing things down help or take breaks? What are things that you find helpful to, limit or to help manage the impact, that you might experience due to your disability? And some other things to consider, if you've accessed accommodations, what's been helpful in the past, what's worked, what maybe didn't work. And also then considering, any supports and resources that you might have that you have access to as well. So just by, thinking of these areas, kind of doing some self-reflection, it might help you to feel, better equipped to identify your needs to others. And that then leads us into self-advocacy. So if you want to move to the next slide, Shelley, just in terms of developing self-advocacy, in our role at OCAD, we generally work with students to advocate accommodation needs in a university setting, but these same skills can translate to an employment setting, especially when someone is requesting accommodations. So in short, being a self-advocate, means the ability to recognize and understand what is important to you and asking for what you need. So just some things, that you might want to consider to support your development of self-advocacy skills, identifying your needs, again, kind of what I just talked about in terms of, self-awareness and being comfortable with kind of figuring out, what your needs are, asking questions and learning how to get information. It's okay to ask questions, to seek information. Having more information and knowledge, helps us to be more informed. And especially when, looking into employment and accommodations, knowing more about job requirements, who you can talk to at a workplace, those things can definitely be helpful. Also can be helpful to know your rights and responsibilities. Being familiar with your rights as an employee and specifically as an employee with a disability can be helpful. And we'll share some resources just in our last slide. And also to considering, responsibilities, depending on, the type of setting that maybe you're seeking employment, there may be different processes to follow to request accommodations. So it can be helpful, to know what your role is in that process. Communicate clearly. It's important to be clear and direct in what you need. Can also be helpful to consider the language or the words that you use, to explain the impact of your disability or to explain your needs. Can be helpful to kind of get in the habit of, being involved in problem solving. So considering solutions if something isn't working. And then again, that, reaching out for support, who is there that can support you, if it's peers, family, maybe someone you consider a mentor, resources, while you're here at OCAD. Those are helpful things to consider as well. Because just, when you can advocate for yourself, specifically in school or in a work environment, it is an important skill to have. And especially, if you do require accommodations, these can be helpful, tools to practice to be able to develop these skills. Just moving on to the next slide then, we thought we would end just by talking about some concrete examples of accommodations, just in terms of, what that might look like transitioning from school to employment. So we just have some examples to kind of get us thinking about what that might look like. So in school, thinking of, maybe if a student required assignment deadline extensions, in an employment setting, that might look like extended time to complete tasks or projects that you're working on. If a student needs to maybe avoid morning classes, in an employment setting, that might look like a flexible work schedule, so being able to flex hours throughout the day. Note-taking support is a common accommodation that some students access. So thinking in the employment setting, maybe that means that a person requires, any kind of verbal instructions or information in writing. And then, ergonomic equipment, might look similar in a school and an employment situation. So if someone needs access, to specialized equipment like a chair, a desk, computer software, in an employment setting, those things could look similar in terms of like a modified workstation. So sometimes we do hear concerns from students about, needing accommodations in school, but feeling, maybe it's not possible in the workplace or, wondering what that might look like. So we thought just like by sharing these quick examples, it can show, there can be a transition of accommodation in school to employment. And if this is something, that you feel that you may need, we'd really encourage you to pursue this and look into it further. And just on our last slide, there's some helpful resources, more so, I guess, in terms of kind of familiarizing yourself with your rights as a person with a disability, in terms of the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disability Acts. There's an employment standard. And similarly to education, there's a legal duty to accommodate. Employers also have a legal duty to accommodate the needs of people with disabilities. So looking for more resources through the Ontario Human Rights Commission, there's a link to their webpage as well. And then just a reminder, while you're a student, if there's any support that Student Accessibility Services can provide, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We're here and we'd be, more than happy to meet with you.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Allison and Moira, for sharing that. So right now, I'll pass it off to Michelle and Courtney to jump right into JobStart.
There we go. Hi, everybody. My name is Courtney. I am the job coach at JobStart with the Capability Program. So just quickly introducing myself and my colleague, Michelle. She's the job developer with the program. So you work closely with both of us if you are a participant, but we will jump right into the information session and learn a bit more about what we do. Just get that bigger there. Okay, hoping everybody can see it. So like I mentioned, we're the Capability Program. We are funded by the federal level of government, so our funding does come through Service Canada. That's just quick fun tidbit about us. That doesn't necessarily affect you at all. So what we're going to be talking about today, we'll do a brief introduction on what JobStart does, who we are. Then we'll go into more depth on what the Capability Program is. We'll be giving you information about our workshops and our job placements. And then we're going to jump into some general information on some resumes. And then we do have some resume critiques that we're going to go through, and we are happy to take, afterwards, if you wanted to email in your resumes for a critique, we're happy to do that for you as well. So quick overview on JobStart. JobStart is a community-based not-for-profit agency that connects people who are looking for work with employers who are looking to hire. That is our main overarching theme. We do also have some settlement services, but for the purpose of today, we're going to be talking more about the employment. Our mission statement is to empower clients and employers to maximize their potential through participation in a variety of career and personal growth programs and services. Our vision is to create innovative opportunities for successful and sustainable futures, and our strategic objectives are to include enhancing the experience for job seekers by strengthening and expanding our strategic alliances. So that is all the stuff that you need to know about what JobStart is. But why you're here is to learn about the Capability Program. And the Capability Program is, I think, a very exciting pre-employment program for folks who do have a disability. You might, if I kind of stumble up and I say CAP, I am referring to the Capability Program. It is short formed over here at JobStart. So sometimes I do say CAP during the presentations. So just so you know, it is the Capability Program. Basically, what we do is that our participants are able to receive extra supports from our coaches and our job developers to be able to go out and be able to find meaningful and sustainable employment. We do have 3 to 4 weeks of pre-employment workshops. Right now, those are all being conducted virtually through Zoom. So we meet 2 to 3 times a week. There is a homework portion, but like Allison and Moira were discussing about accommodations, we do accommodate our participants. So if maybe homework isn't necessarily something that you are able to accomplish, or you need extra supports with that, we're more than happy to accommodate each individual participant based on their needs. And then after the workshop period, that is when folks are able to access supports to acquire a 12-week paid work placement. We'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. But I wanted to showcase who we serve. So a lot of the questions that we get are, is capability only for folks that have physical disabilities? And the quick and simple answer to that is no. This is a breakdown of our participants and the disability that they are, disclosing to us at the time of intake. And you can see that the majority of, not necessarily the majority, but the biggest pie chunk here is actually mental health related. So we are able to accommodate mental health disabilities, and we are able to help our participants kind of figure out what, if any, accommodations they might need in the workplace, which is one of the biggest, we like to think it's one of the biggest differences that our program is able to offer is the accommodation support. So just a bit about our pre-employment workshops. So we start everything with career exploration. So we do go through the career cruising website just to see, you know, what do you like, and does that line up with what where your skill sets lie. So we like to go through that because it can be quite eye-opening for a lot of folks. We go through job action planning, which is, you know, putting each step down. So the first step to finding a job for that individual, maybe their first step is to write their resume. Then their second step is to start applying. But how are they going to start applying? Where are they looking? So we really break it down into all of those smaller sections to make these goals more attainable. We do the resume and cover letter writing. We do have accommodation and disclosure workshops, so it expands a bit on what Allison and Moira had discussed a bit earlier. And like they'd mentioned, accommodations are individualized. So every individual that identifies as having a disability is going to need a different accommodation than their counterparts. So, you know, maybe Allison and I both identify as being somebody that suffers from depression. That could look very different for Allison than it does for me. So that's where we're looking at, what do you as an individual need to be successful in a workplace, and how can we help you and assist you in attaining that. We also do mock interviews, which most of our participants will say that they don't like doing them because they are nerve-wracking, but they are very beneficial. Mock interviews, it's a practice interview. So Michelle and I grill you on your interview questions, and then we provide feedback. And the feedback piece is where a lot of individuals will then realize, okay, I can change this up a little bit, and that might make me more successful. And there are some other things that we do as well, but that's the main chunk and really the core of the program. The paid work placements, I'll give you a quick overview, and then if Michelle wants to jump in and talk a bit more about it, I will let her do that. So after our participants have completed the workshops, then, you know, the hope is that our participants have the tools and skills to start their job search. And then there's the support to help obtain that 12-week paid work placement. And that is a collaborative effort. So we do expect that our participants are performing an independent job search and that they are applying to positions on their own, but keeping us updated through job logs. And our participants do receive supports to acquire a placement. So I'm going to let Michelle jump in and talk a bit about what that looks like.
Sure. Thank you, Courtney. So again, I mean, it all depends on each individual, but where Courtney ends, I begin, but there's a lot of overlap. So we both assist you with, you know, setting your job goals, making sure that it's realistic and viable in this current job market. And not only that, we help you to connect with the employers. So, you know, depending on the individual, my level of involvement in that initial connection and ask for the interview can be very different. But I am there to work alongside you and match every effort that you're making. I think one of the most important things is in the work experience placement, what we're asking the employer for is, even though you may not have every skill or every ability that they may have in their wish list of a job posting, I'm able to go in and say, you know what we can do is we can offer a risk-free way for you to give this individual an opportunity in the job. And then I'm there for that 12-week period for the retention piece, especially when you're a new graduate. And I don't know, some of you may or may not have had any work experience up until now. And given that it is a very different job market right now, I think you will find that, you know, with that extra, you know, hand holding and somebody to help negotiate and guide you along the way with what we need to disclose, what we don't need to disclose, what should the expectation be? How can we troubleshoot? How can we work around some of the things that you may encounter for the first time in your life on the job? That's the role that I fulfill. And my goal is to, take the time on the front end to ensure the best back end sort of result. It's not just to say, okay, well, McDonald's is hiring. Let's just, go get you a job at McDonald's. We want to work with you to work towards your ultimate career goal. And so it's developing the skills that can lead you eventually to what you need in the long run. And, just, I think when you're a new grad, I think a lot of it is just getting in there, getting your feet wet and understanding what you're comfortable with in a workplace, what works for you, what allows you to be the best that you can be and to achieve the best result at the end of it. So that's basically what my role is as the job developer. And like Courtney said, there's a lot of good funding from Service Canada that can help you with supports, whether it is some adaptations at the workplace, like if you need a special computer software or some other ergonomic adjustments. That's where I would also be there to support you and to give that ask to the employer and show them that there's a risk-free way for them to be able to accommodate those needs. So back to you, Courtney.
Thank you, Michelle. So these are some of the areas that we have gotten some of our placements in. I'm not going to read all of them, but we've had some successful placements in administrative roles, customer service roles, manufacturing, and others as well. So it's not necessarily limited to this is the type of position that we can help you get, and that's it. You have to go work there. We don't like doing that. We like to really, it's tailored to the individual, and we are always happy to make connections, in the field that our participants are looking in. And the job retention support, I know Michelle touched on this a bit, but just to further it a little bit. So the job developer does follow up with the employers that the client or the participant has applied to, and and there is the ability to explain what the program is and what the benefit is for the employer to hire someone through the capability program. And our job developer can also act as a mediator between the participant and the employer if there's anything that comes up during that placement period, which is 12 weeks, which is 3 months, which is the probationary period. Typically for most positions is 3 month probation. And a lot of job loss does occur during that 3 months. So what Michelle is able to do as a job developer is if there is any issue that could potentially result in job loss, she can get in there and discuss and try to figure out a way to smooth that over so job loss doesn't occur. I'm going to, if there's any questions, let's open that up now for questions regarding the program, and then we can jump into the resume writing portion.
Okay, great. We do have one question from an attendee, which I'll just read out loud. So, hi there. I'm wondering what kinds of supports are available to folks who want to start their own independent practice / business or want to pivot to a trade-based profession. As a mature student, I returned to school to opt out of the job cycle after going through similar programs and working in various entry-level jobs in the sector you mentioned. And then continuing on that is a question, is this program limited to Toronto?
So, Courtney, if you want, I can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah.
In terms of the supports for independent practice or startup for business, we would be able to help refer you to some other services that are geared towards business startups. That's not something that falls under our realm. But again, if you connect with JobStart, some of the pre-employment that we do, we can also connect you to the services that if we don't have that particular link or support, financial support, then we may be able to suggest a route for you to go. So that's that one. I understand you've gone through a lot of programs and done these entry-level jobs and sectors and so on, and it hasn't worked out for you. I've seen a lot. I've been working in this industry for a long time, not to age myself, but I understand what you're saying. I understand that, in the past, a lot of times with employment programs, it is like, okay, our goal is to get you a job, and that's, we're gonna say, okay, McDonald's is hiring, why don't you go work there? That's what capability, how it's a little bit different. What we like to do is work with you to build upon the skills. We may not be able to help you, achieve your end goal in the first work experience placement, but I definitely do take the time on the front end to look at where you want to be. And along with Courtney, we look at what skills are desirable in that field and what types of jobs might work for you to build some of those skills that can help lead you to that. So as a stepping stone to your ultimate goal, that's something that Courtney and I have been very successful in, is helping folks with that. And that's what's great about the capability program is it can offer that funding to an employer to say, hey, Jane Doe or John Doe may not have everything on your wish list, but we do have a funding ability to offer a paid placement where they can achieve some of those or learn some of those skills that can allow the employer the ability to maybe, if there's, for instance, a single course that you need to learn a specific software to do that job, we may be able to work and negotiate with the employer to help fund that so that they can invest in you to be able to get you that experience. I think it's really important that I note, and I should have probably earlier, that not always do I even disclose to an employer that there is a disability. Because this is self-disclosed in the capability program to join our program, there is not an absolute need to even disclose that to an employer. So we will look at the pros and cons of why we may need an accommodation, why we may not need an accommodation, what is the need to disclose, and how much do we want to disclose. So that's the other unique thing about capability that makes it different than some of the other employment programs, is that this is all, you're the leader in this. You tell me what you want me to do or what you want me to say. I'm there to support you and to help facilitate a match. And that's what I've spent most of my career doing, is helping to match the right person with the right job, because I firmly and passionately believe that there is a job for everybody. And I don't believe in forcing a square peg into a round hole, so to speak.
Michelle,
Hope that answered it.
Michelle and Courtney, thanks for that. Can I actually ask a follow-up? Just hearing you both talk a little bit about these, transitional skills, realizing that looking for work is a journey and rarely a destination, so to speak. I'm wondering if hypothetically, say someone is looking to learn about starting a business, if, for instance, a potential placement they could do is working with someone who did start their own business and like learning the tools of all the lovely things that do with incorporatizing, sole proprietorship, all those lovely details. So is that kind of an example of something where it might be a good segue point?
We do, there is mentoring within some of the realm of JobStart's programs. I should probably let Courtney talk a little bit after I just say this piece. What I would recommend in an instance like that is if a young person came to me, a recent grad, and said, I want to start my own business, and this is my idea for the business. What I may recommend, if they have not had any business experience or work experience, or very little, I may recommend a work experience placement within that industry to open your ears and to listen. Rather than a formal mentoring partnership, it may be valuable to gain some grassroots skills in that industry, to work within that industry, to understand how it works, and to decide if that is something that they want to spend their entire life investment in. So other than that, I'll pass back to Courtney, who might be able to talk a bit more about the mentoring aspect.
Yes. So sorry, I was just reading one of the questions and got distracted a little bit on my own end. But there are, like Michelle had mentioned, there are some mentoring programs out there that could be very beneficial. Again, it's all going to depend on what the individual person is looking for, how they could best be served, and what programs may be best suited for them. But I do agree with Michelle in the fact that if this is an individual who may not have worked in that field, it may, depending on that person, it is likely going to be very beneficial for them to find a position in that field so they can gain some skills prior to trying to start their own business. I think there was one other question. I'm not sure if I closed it or not. So the second part of that question was if the program was limited to Toronto. So I did answer that in the chat, but just putting it out there, JobStart is based in Toronto. We can, however, serve folks within the GTA. So Again, that's going to be a conversation. You know, if you're super far away from us, maybe we're not the best suited program for you, but we have served folks that are in Mississauga, Brampton. I believe we've had somebody from Vaughan. So there are, you know, we're not just strictly, this is our catchment area, this is it. We can discuss with you as well. And then somebody else had asked the first steps if we're interested in the program. So just to answer that one, there will be, at the end, we're going to tell you how to reach out to us. And Shelly's going to also be sending out an email that will have instructions on how you can join if you're interested in doing so. Perfect. So we'll get moving along. I think we only have about 20 minutes left, so I don't want to go over our time. So I'll go through this, and then again, if there are questions, if we have time at the end, we can always answer some more then, and we're always happy to take additional questions after the fact through email. So quick on resume writing. This is not a fully extensive workshop. Our resume workshop can, you know, last anywhere from 2 hours to 3 days, depending on how it's structured and in what program it's in. So this is a very quick intro to resume writing, I will say. So general information is that a resume is a 1 to 2 page document that presents your background and markets your value to a potential employer. And the resume's key goal is to land you an interview. The purpose is to show off your achievements, highlight your positive attributes, and exhibit your areas of expertise. Do have a quick pop quiz here. So I'm going to ask Moira to answer this because she can unmute herself. So how much time do you think an average employer takes to look at each resume? So our options are A, 3 minutes, B, 1 minute, C, 30 seconds, or D, 6 seconds.
I want to say 30 seconds.
Final answer?
I feel like you're going to hit me with 6 seconds.
I am going to hit you with 6 seconds. So the average employer only spends about 6 seconds looking at your resume. And that's not to say that they won't necessarily go back then and read it in more depth, but when recruiters or hiring managers are getting, you know, they have one open position and they may have gotten 250 applications, emailed in resumes that they need to look at. They are doing a very, very quick glance. So 6 seconds is that glance that they're going to say, okay, I'm going to read this further, or they're screening out. And this is if an actual human is seeing your resume and it's not going through an applicant tracking software. And talk a bit about what that means. But this is why formatting your resume is so, so important. Because that 6 seconds, they're not necessarily reading any of the content. That's just looking at a piece of paper to say, maybe they didn't like that font we chose, so they're not going to read it further. It can be as, you know, kind of simple as that. Did they like your font choice? Did you have color on there? Did they not like the color? Did they want color and there wasn't color? So those are all things that go into that quick 6 seconds of somebody looking at your resume. So a bit on resume components. Sorry, my people there are in the way of my words. So the content of your resume is the information that is being presented. So obviously we need to start with our personal and contact information. So your name should be the biggest font on the top of your resume. And then your contact info. How are they contacting? Are we putting our phone number on there? Our email address? Are we going to include our address, or is that something that we want to keep off? Because there is a lot of information out there on the benefits and kind of pitfalls of having your full address on a resume. It can be a breach of privacy for some folks. They're not comfortable doing it. If, say, I'm hiring in Etobicoke and the postal code on that person's resume is in Scarborough, that could be a reason why that individual is screened out. But then on the flip side, if I don't see an address, maybe I don't want to contact them because I'm not getting that information. So there's a lot of different things that go into the contact information. And a lot of folks think that this is the easiest part of a resume, but there's actually a lot that still goes into it. The next part is a summary statement, which is, this used to be where folks would put an objective on their resume. And at JobStart, we like to say, leave an objective off, because an objective tells the employer what they want, or sorry, what they already know. An objective reads, you know, seeking a position as ABC at XYZ company so I can enhance my skills. They know that. You're applying for the job. They know that you want that job. A summary statement, on the other hand, is telling the employer how you add value. So it could say something along the lines of administrative professional with 5 years experience working in legal offices, and then it might give a bit more information on who that individual is. And I know that we're we're more on the creative field here. Legal is just the first thing that popped into my mind. And when we're moving down further, that's where we're putting our summary of qualifications and our highlight of skills. This section can be called many different things. It doesn't matter how you label it, but these are going to be your bullet points highlighting what skills you have. Then we move to the work experience, then education. For new graduates, sometimes we like to put education above work experience, and that's okay. For folks who have worked in their field of choice, it's always better to put work experience on top of the education, because employers are looking to see what you have already done. They want to know that you have those skills, and the hands-on working in the field experience is going to usually outweigh what you've done in school. Now, on the flip side, if you haven't worked in that field as of yet, and you're trying to get in there, but you're a new grad, you just finished, we want that education up front. So that's the first thing that they're seeing over maybe your work experience. Say you did entry level in grocery stores, or you worked in fast food for your first job, which all of those are great experience. There are a lot of transferable skills there, but we want them to see that I've just finished OCAD in this program. This is why I'm applying for this position. If they're not seeing that education and what they're seeing isn't necessarily relevant to the position, that might be a reason why your resume gets screened out. And then there's other things that we can put on a resume that these are optional sections. Not everyone is going to need to put them on a resume, but it could be memberships, professional development classes, volunteer experience, tech skills. So anybody that does anything to do with coding, they definitely want to have a technical skills section, because they want to be able to outline those skills very clearly. And when you're prepping your content for your resume, you really need to ask yourself, do my qualifications fit the needs of this employer? And that is the information that needs to be put on there. So a lot of folks that have been in the labor market for a longer period of time, they want to put everything on their resume, because I worked there, I accomplished this, I should be able to put that information out to the world. But that's when resumes can sometimes get a bit long, or the information on there isn't necessarily relevant to where they're trying to go. So it's really important to kind of pare down and be concise on a resume. We have very limited space. So it's important to make sure that the information that we're giving out is relevant to the positions that we're applying for. Electronic or text resumes. So touching on what I mentioned about applicant tracking softwares, these resumes are going to be different than your nicely formatted, colorful resume that we've just made. Electronic and text-based resumes are typically found in larger companies. So if you've ever been applying for work and you need to kind of type in everything into text boxes on a website, and then they also still ask you to attach your resume, that is likely going through an applicant tracking software or an ATS system. And these are used by companies to quickly sort and rank job applications. So the company comes up with their list of keywords, or phrases that they want their ideal candidate to have in their resume. And then the ATS software searches their database and then ranks them based on the number of matching keywords and phrases. So let's say company A has said that they want 80% keywords, and your resume is submitted and you have 75, your resume is not going to be looked at by a human. It's automatically screened out and no one is looking at that, unfortunately. So it's really important when we're looking at the job postings to be able to pick out keywords and get them on your resume. And this is just as important. Say you're attaching it to an email, there's somebody going to be reading it. We still want to have keywords and tailoring involved in our resumes, because that will, if somebody's written the job posting and they're familiar with the job posting, if you have similar words, they're going to be eye-catching. But when we're talking about ATS, there is a very hard and fast line where the company says we need this percentage of keywords, and anything under that, unfortunately, is screened out. And this is why it's really important to tailor your application to the position that you're applying for. So some quick tips on resume writing is to always tell the truth. We don't want to lie. We don't want to embellish. Proofread, and then have somebody else proofread. So, do the spell check, go through Grammarly, however you are checking, doing that spelling and grammar check. But it's also really important for you to read over it and make sure there's no issues, and then ask somebody else. And all of our participants, we do this for them. If you don't have a job coach or anyone that you think, anyone like that, ask a friend or a family member to read it over and see if they can pick up on anything that may need to be changed. One of the biggest tips that we can always give is to update your resume when you have started a new job. And the reason for that is it's quick and fresh in your mind. So you likely still have the job posting for the job that you've just started, and it doesn't have to necessarily look pretty. But if you can copy and paste that info onto your resume, then say your dream job comes up, you'll have less work to do. You'll just have to go in and do some minor editing as opposed to having to restart your resume from square one. I've seen a lot of folks who, when they start a job, they delete all of their resumes and cover letters. I'm like, don't do that. Then you have to start again from ground zero when you're looking for work again, or if something happens. And we saw a lot of this with individuals who unfortunately lost their jobs during the pandemic, is that they weren't necessarily prepared to be having to job search because they didn't have a resume ready to go. They didn't have cover letters. They didn't have the documents that they needed to be able to go and apply for work. So it's really important to make sure that you have those regardless of your employment status. Tailor your resume for each position. You always want to keep your resume to 1 or 2 pages maximum. So we don't want to be sending out resumes that are 1.5 pages, that it looks a bit sloppy. So we want to either get that to 2 full pages or ideally go to 1 page. And there is going to be a lot of conflicting information out there about how long your resume should be. I personally right now am preferring more 1-page resumes, whereas other folks, other employment counselors that I know are preferring 2-page resumes. So it's going to depend on what industry you're in, what the norm is there, and how long you've been in the labor market, on how long your resume should be, but it should never be over 2 pages. We don't include references on our resume. So I've seen this a lot of times, especially in new graduates, usually more in the high school grads, but they will include their references at the end of their resume, and we don't do that. That is a document that's sent in after your interview if requested. And we don't want to use jargon or abbreviations that aren't well known. So like I'd mentioned, we refer to the capability program as CAP at JobStart. If I was applying for a position, I wouldn't want to be putting CAP on my resume because not everyone is familiar with that. Okay, so time. Shelley, do we have time to do the critique, or should we save that?
So We do have time if folks who are here are interested in staying a little bit longer to go into it, but I'll leave that up to the audience a little bit in terms of what they would like. Or like we mentioned, we are going to make this recording afterwards. So if you have to run for something at 3 for a class or something else, don't worry, we got you with the recording.
And we'd love for you to reconnect with us after this on an individual basis with Courtney or I, and we can do an individual critique afterwards too, and then talk further about whether capability might be a good solution for you in your journey or transition to employment.
Okay, so I'll do one resume critique in the interest of time. I had a few that I could do, but I'll get one done. But for the folks that might need to leave now, oops, don't know why that looked like that. But if you were interested in joining the capability program, you can reach out to me at c.boudreau@jobstart.org. Or you can give me a call at 416-231-2295, extension 4279. And then this information will also be shared with you via email afterwards as well. So feel free to reach out if you were interested in joining the program. Let me just grab a resume. So I'm going to do this one. So the contact info, I'm hoping everybody can see that. Michelle, can you give me a thumbs up if you can see it?
Sorry, can you see the
resume?
Partially, yeah, if you move it up there, yeah.
Okay, perfect. So as you can see, we have the contact info and the name are obscured for privacy reasons. But these are some resumes, or this is a resume that Shelley shared. So I just wanted to show you some of the things here we don't like to see on resumes. So quickly here, the contact and the experience, that's not the best line, but as you can see on this resume, there's a line right down the middle. This makes the resume, it makes it harder to read. So we don't like to see this. There are resume templates, and I personally do like to use resumes that have columns, but we don't want it directly down the center. We would prefer to see it off to either side of it. Okay. So in terms of where the name placement is, that's great. We could, however, have the name over here and then the contact info over here. So that's just one way that we could change up some of the formatting on this resume right off the bat. I'm going to scroll down here to the about section. So on a resume, we would want to likely change the wording from about to professional summary, executive summary, so something along those lines. Again, this is personal preference. So we can change that up. Some people prefer to have about, and that's okay. However, if we're using terms like professional summary, it's more impactful. And then during resume critique, what we do is we go through the resume line by line by line, and we'll give you feedback on how you can incorporate some changes. And some of our participants, they need a bit more assistance than just, here's a critique, go do it, and we can do some of the editing for you. But we do like to prepare our participants to be able to write resumes throughout their career, because we're here to help you prep and be ready to go out there and find employment. And we would love for you to retain some of the skills that we help you learn during the program. So the education piece, this is great how they have it formatted. So this is obviously an older resume, but they have, if you are currently in school, you always do want to say to present or to your expected completion date. So say you are likely graduating next year, 2022, we could say 2020 to expected completion 2022. One other thing that I want to mention on this resume here is the skills. So a lot of folks we've been seeing this trend in resumes for a few years now, is that they are giving percentages or bar graphs or something in terms of skills. And what we've been seeing in the resume writing field is that a lot of employers dislike them. And the reason is because these are subjective. So where has this individual determined that their skill is 75% in Photoshop? That could be different for everybody. I could maybe say that I have a 75% skill level in Photoshop. And in the reality is I have very limited experience in that, but maybe I think I'm really good at it. So this is where employers are not necessarily liking these bar graphs or the percentages because they are subjective. I'm gonna share another one. Sorry, give me 1 second to pull one up. There we go. Okay, so this is another one, and again, this person has used about, so maybe they were taught to do that in class, and that's okay. A lot of times it's we find that if folks are coming from the same kind of place, their resumes are formatted very, very similar. So a lot of our high school, or I shouldn't say a lot of our, but a lot of the high school resumes that I've seen all had the exact same formatting. Their skills were exactly the same because that's how they were taught to do it in their careers class. And that's okay, but you know, we still want to show that we are an individual. Okay, so this one we have again the about. This isn't necessarily a professional summary. So this one's worded a little bit differently. It seems more like an objective statement to me. So I'll read it quickly. I'm interested in a motion graphics career where I can create unique, imaginative, and compelling stories with engaging visual design. So we're telling the employer what they know. You're applying to this position. They know that you are interested in that role because you've applied for it. So what we could do on this one is change up the wording to say something along the lines of recent graduate pursuing a career in motion graphics design where I can, sorry, I should have prepped that one a little bit better. But we'd want to give a solid, concrete example of what we have done in that field, even if it's a project at school. Showcasing projects and assignments as a new graduate is still valid experience, and it's still valuable to showcase that on a resume or in a cover letter to a potential employer. Now, going down a bit more, as we can see, this person has their work experience is the choice that they've made on how to format it. However, again, when we're looking at the layout, we have a box here, we have a second box here, and the third here. This makes it a little bit difficult to read. So as opposed to doing that, we could look at it and put, this is where the about section is, that's fine. And then put it as more of a rectangle. So the job title or the company name, location and date, and then have it as a larger rectangle underneath with the work experience. And that just creates it a little bit easier to read and to follow, because again, remembering that somebody is likely only looking at this for 6 seconds before deciding if they want to read it further. And if it's difficult to read, the likelihood of them saying, oh, I want to look at this more is very little. They have a stack of, say, 100 resumes that they need to get through, and they want to make sure that that they can go through those as fast as possible. So that would be something that we would want to change up for all of the job or work experiences. Another thing here is that we have skills down here underneath education. So skills we would want to bump up, because that is a highlight of any type of resume. Sorry, I scrolled that a little bit quickly here. But that's another thing that we would want to bump up. And if we did want education to be at, a quick eye level, we'd likely then move that over and put that above work experience, and then put the work experience under education. So there's some formatting things here that we could change up. Another thing that I want to show right here in this work experience is the verb tense. So this individual is saying initiate and maintain client relationships in person and via email. When we're doing resume writing, everything needs to be in past tense. So this should really say initiated and maintained client relationships in person and via email. It's just making those little minor tweaks. And same down here, member assistance and maintaining stock levels. We would want to say maintain stock levels. We could also go through and kind of beef these up a bit and give some different examples, or just flesh them out a bit more. Typically, we recommend 5 to 7 bullet points under each work experience. As you can see with this individual, they have 4 in the first one, 2, and then 2. So we might want to be increasing the amount of information that we're giving if relevant. Again, this person has done a good job at keeping their resume to 1 page. So maybe other things that they've done here aren't necessarily relevant, so we wouldn't put it on. But it's a conversation that we would have with them. And when we're looking at the volunteer experience, these are not formatted, or they're not written the same as the work experience was. So here we do have assisted. That's great. They've used the right verb. However, this is now more of a full sentence as opposed to the bullet points. And then you can see that again in the soccer coach, coached different teams aged 5 to 15 years old, organized games and practices, but there's a comma. These should really be bullet points. So there's one here, every time there's a comma, it could be a bullet point depending. So I'm going to leave that there. And like we mentioned, if you were interested in getting a resume critique, we are more than happy to provide one to you. And it would be more in depth than that. That was just a very quick overview. And I think there were some, if there are any questions, we're happy to answer them now.
Are there any final questions for Courtney or Michelle today? I think that's it. I think you both covered a really comprehensive overview. Thanks so much for sharing that walkthrough a little bit. It's so great to hear that your team does practice interviews, mock interviews, because what we normally recommend is talk with a friend to do this, or even practice in the mirror. Exercising that muscle of speaking out loud is so key sometimes. So I think that seems to be it. There are no more other questions coming in. We had one last one, which is this talk recorded? So yes, this talk is recorded. After it's transcribed and uploaded, we will send it to everybody who came out today, or folks who weren't able to make it today. I want to thank the student accessibility team who had to leave at 3, but big thank you to them for taking the time to come out today and share a little bit about their services, but also what skills students at OCAD have sort of cultivated during this time here that can help them with this transition. Oh, sorry, we have one more question. Do you accept OCAD alumni to join this service? I'll let you answer that, Courtney.
Yes, yes. We don't just accept OCAD students. Obviously, we do service pretty much the entire GTA. So if you are an alumni, we're happy to chat with you as well.
Yeah, that's a really great.
There's no age restrictions. There's no other criteria surrounding that other than that you are unemployed and that you do self-identify with a disability.
Okay, hope that answers that question for that individual. Okay, so a big thank you to Michelle and Courtney for joining us today and sharing a little bit about the JobStart program, and also getting the wheels turning for how to optimize your resume now that everybody's sort of starting the search for work. we'll keep an eye out. I'll send an email a little today with just some of the links that were discussed, but please do reach out to the JobStart team and hopefully they can help you on a more individual basis as they've been mentioning before. And thanks to everybody who wanted to spend their afternoon with us to learn a bit more about this program.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for coming, and yes, thank you, Shelley, for having us. It was great. I love facilitating these things, so I had a lot of fun.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.